Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is just a random video that I was just thinking about. I had a phone call just a few minutes ago, and the sister was telling me about how she was abused, her mother was abused, her father was abused, and the list goes on from one abuse to another. And of course, abuse most often leads to another abuse. And without us realizing, we tend to get all that agony, all that sorrow that starts filling us on the inside. And we tend to start wondering when and how do we relate, and who is responsible for my pains, and who's responsible for the trauma that I'm going through. And we start wondering, does it where does the trace start from? Where does it end? And am I going to also be responsible for retaliating from someone that abused me? And to answer that question, it's just one ayah that I would like to quote. It's not just when dealing with parents, but it's also in dealing with relatives and dealing with so many people out there that might have abused you. In general, there's no doubt that abuse, oppression, and injustice is actually haram and against Islam. But does that mean that I have the right and the justification to retaliate in a different way? Well, I'd like to answer that one in two or three different answers. Number one is that all abuse and all oppression is haram, period. This is not to justify that anybody going through abuse that they have to accept it, or to say that they have to somehow um, be patient and accept it and be forbearing and accept it. And if you don't have the sabr and accept it, then you're doomed to hell. This is not whatsoever what Islam says. Yes, indeed, to be patient, to have the sabr, indeed is of a higher value than retaliating, than trying to somehow fight in a way that is probably acting in retaliation. Islam tells you and orders you to stop the oppression. But when it deals with parents, it is really hard. So, how do I deal with somebody that is abusive? Well, indeed, you have to stop the oppression. You can, and you definitely have the right, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says in the ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says in the ayah, لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes that people would announce and speak of the different evils and the different wrongdoings and the different sins that people are committing, unless you're oppressed. Then in that situation, you would have the right to speak up and go to someone that is capable of uplifting the oppression. Uplifting the oppression actually means seeking authority. It may mean to seek your relatives, maybe a grandfather, maybe an uncle, or maybe even a different, let me call it, formal authority. Removing the oppression is actually your right and your responsibility. That's one thing. But when the oppression is no longer taking place, can I retaliate, and how do I deal with this? And that's why I wanted to take in that ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi. I want you to look at this ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He orders that we would be dealing with each other in justice. In other words, this is the general rule when it comes to social justices and justice in general is definitely an issue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed. This is the general ruling. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the whole world in justice, where there are certain numbers. You give and you have to take something in return. This is justice. There's that balance that has to be there. But what if justice was not practiced? And that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually takes us to the second level. Justice is supposed to be the general rule, but as a person that is right now going beyond the person going beyond right now your level of wanting to end an injustice, in that situation, you're actually going for the second level, which is al-ihsan. The difference between al-adl and al-ihsan is that al-adl is that I give something and I take something in return. But al-ihsan is to act with integrity, is to act in principle, is to act in high standards, even when you may not have anything that was given back to you, even when someone had wronged you in any way. And that's where, when mention to the story where the the sister that called had said that she was abused by her mother, neglected by her father, and the list goes on and on. I would say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. That your Lord Almighty decreed that you would not worship but Him alone, and you would deal with great ihsan. The word ihsan means with great value, with high principles, with principles that are not waiting for anything in return. What about the abuse that they had committed? That the Lord Almighty will take it from them, that the Lord Almighty will hold them accountable for, but not you to discipline them, or you to somehow retaliate for the wrongdoing that had happened. What about the story that some people would mention, that a man came to Umar ibn al-Khattab and said, my father or my son abused me, and then Umar ibn al-Khattab says, well, get me your son, let me have a conversation with him, and then discovers that his father had actually named him. The son's complaint was, my father did not give me the things that I deserved, the things that I had the right to get as a child, and even named me Sarsur, which means beetle. Well, here's the thing, is that this narration, this athar, is actually not authentic. So to base our retaliation against our parents by depending on that athar, it is not authentic. We cannot use that athar as a reference to retaliate against our parents. So what if they wronged me? What if they harmed me? What? And the list goes on and on. I would say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِمَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Luqman that even if they fight you to associate partners with the Lord Almighty, don't obey them in that regard, and be a companion to them in this dunya with goodness, with kindness, with integrity, and with principle. And that's why he said, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. In this life, be a companion to them on those good terms. Even when they had neglected their responsibility, don't neglect your responsibility. Even when they had not been committed to what the Lord Almighty had asked them to be committed to, You live based on the principle that the Lord Almighty asked you to live based on. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the Lord Almighty orders that one would live based on justice. But even when one leaves justice, go for the second level, which is living based on ihsan, not based on equality, but based on integrity, not based on equality and necessarily social justice, but based on integrity, high value, and high principle. This is what ihsan stands for. وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. This ayah is taking us directly because most of the injustices actually come from people that we know, from our parents, from our brothers and sisters, from our relatives. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually right that minute when he talks about adl and justice, most social injustices happen from relatives that we usually seek support from, but they're the ones to many times fail us. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. The word ita reminds us of zakat, doesn't it? The word ita actually means to give, even though the other person is not giving anything in return. And that's why the Lord Almighty says, ita idal qurba, give, even if your qurba, your relatives, are not giving you anything back. Even if they had wronged you, you live based on the principle. You live with taqwa being the principle, the lens that disciplines, that makes that tazkiyah, that purifies your behavior and that purifies your inside. وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى, and give to the relatives. وَيَنْهَى, and he forbids al-fahsha, al-munkar, al-baghi. Now, here's the thing. Why did it actually talk about that now? Because usually when we're wrong, we're human beings at the end of the day. If somebody slaps you, the first and the normal and the natural consequence or the natural feeling is that we get up to fight back. But the Lord Almighty here, when in talking about the relatives, tells you to pause, because he said, وَيَنْهَى, and he forbids, because usually as human beings, we give the justification to ourselves that it's okay, this person wronged me, therefore I have all the right to swear at them, to beat, to wrong them, to take things from them, to harm them in any way because they harmed me first. That's usually how we deal with things. But the Lord Almighty emphasized, yes, he understands what the relatives and how the relatives can be the first, instead of being the supporters, being the first ones to stab you on your back. You would have people that are strangers giving you more respect than your own brothers and sisters. This is so common. So the Lord Almighty tells you, not because somebody wronged you in any way, don't go down their level. And that's why he said, وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ, and he forbids that anybody would do fahsha. Fahsha is in words most of the times, unless it's fahsha al-fahsha, unless al-fahsha is relating to zina. So, and forbids the fahsha, the things that you might say wrong in words, which is why the Prophet ﷺ explains that, said, لَيْسَ الْمُؤْمِنُ بِالطَّعَانِ وَلَا اللَّعَانِ وَلَا الْفَاحِشِ وَلَا الْبَذِيءِ. A believer is not a person that damns things. لَيْسَ الْمُؤْمِنُ بِالطَّعَانِ وَلَا اللَّعَانِ is not the one that starts complaining and abusing others. وَلَا الْفَاحِشِ, and does not use any ill language to swear at people. وَلَا الْفَاحِشِ, and does not speak of words that are not appropriate, illicit words to describe things or describe people, or call people by names of animals, or call people by names of illicit names, or using bad words, and we all know those words, وَلَا الْبَذِيء, and does not speak in that language. That's not what a believer does. وَلَا وَالْمُنْكَرْ, a believer, the Lord Almighty forbids that one would practice any form of verbal transgression, physical transgression, or even both verbal, monetary, or physical oppression or retaliation. Even when people go low, the Lord Almighty is telling you, be part of those people that live based on ihsan. Even when people go low in their akhlaq, don't let that gravity pull you down to their level. We can sometimes and many times give ourselves the justification, they started it first, and Allah says, Al-aynu bil-ayn was-sinnu bis-sin. We can always say, hey, they started it first and I have the right to retaliate because Allah says it's eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And we can give ourselves all that. Don't let others abuse you. Absolutely not. In fact, Islam tells you to stop the abuse. No matter how, but not in ways of getting abuse. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to remind you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ قُتِلَ مَظْلُومًا فَقَدْ جَعَلْنَا لِوَلِيِّهِ سُلْطَانًا فَلَا يُسْرَفْ فِي الْقَتْلِ. The Lord Almighty says in Surah Al-Isra, whoever was killed in any oppressive way, فَقَدْ جَعَلْنَا لِوَلِيِّهِ, then we had made their guardians, we had given their guardians an authority, a power. فَلَا يُسْرِفْ فِي الْقَتْلِ. What does that mean? That the Lord Almighty is telling them that even if the person was killed, justice will then prevail. Justice will come back and compensation to be given to that person. No matter how long, it will be given to them in this dunya before the akhirah. How? Well, even if that person died and was killed in some form of a crime or oppression, the Lord Almighty will even grant those that will come later after him from his family the authority. And the Lord Almighty here is giving us that signal that the authority is going to be so big, and he's warning them, فَلَا يُسْرِفْ فِي الْقَتْلِ. Do not abuse that authority and abuse your position and actually wrong even more than what you have been harmed with. That's the same thing. If the Lord Almighty compensates the person that was killed, how is it with the person that was probably abused and all those different kinds of abuse? Remember, the Lord Almighty is Al-Adil. He is the one that is most just. The Lord Almighty will retaliate, compensate for you, no matter how long it may take. Just wanted to say that. يَعِظُكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. Just a word, a reminder for myself, for all of us, that we should always live based on integrity, based on the Lord Almighty, and not based on our inner feelings, which could be to retaliate or probably to do wrong. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.